12:30. I think we'll get started if you're ready, Wendy.
Yes, I'm ready.
Great. Well, welcome everyone to another Ollie Short. Today we are going to talk to Wendy Stubbs, and she's going to give a presentation on beginning genealogy 102. Thank you, Wendy.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. And I'm going to be speaking about researching your Scandinavian ancestors. And a lot of this came about because I have a lot of Norwegian and Danish background in my DNA. And so that's really what got me started on most of it. I have not done the English side as much. For some reason, I just really care more about the Scandinavian. I don't know. So if you've done the DNA test, you know what your results are, and that can be really helpful to get you going and see where to research and find out things. I had heard family stories from my Norwegian side of my family, especially from my great aunts, but it's just been fun finding out lots of really useful information. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about different types of records, how to find things, and so on. I mean, obviously, a lot of us have probably used Ellis Island records, but there are a lot of other types of records that you can find as well. There are military records, church records, property and land, probates, estates, censuses are very useful. Family stories can be useful. Government records, cemetery records. And so I'm going to point out and highlight some of these areas of things that I have found very helpful. For instance, on Facebook, there are groups of many of these regions in the Scandinavian countries. I belong to one from the Northern Norway group. And one day somebody posted in their picture of their great-grandfather that happened to be a brother to my great-grandfather. The gentleman was from California, and then somebody else piped in, and it was also his brother to his great-grandfather, and he was from Maine. So here, all three of us were related in that group, not knowing that. And so we learned a little bit of history right there. Plus, I gained another picture of a family person. So some of those social media groups, you guys, can be very, very, very helpful. There are a lot of people that join those groups and are looking for information about that region that they come from. So that can be certainly very, very helpful. So the goal there today is to find some resources and websites to help you research this. This is a picture of my great-great-grandparents that came over. And actually it's their parents, great-great-great-grandparents that are from Norway, the northern part in Nordland by Meyer. And it was their children, that several of them that came over to America. They had name changes. So remember, if you have Scandinavian relatives, there might be a lot of name changes. So the picture I just showed was of Edward Olsen. His son is my great-grandfather, Håkon Christian Edvardson, but he changed it to Felsted when he came over to Canton, South Dakota, because the farm they were from was Felgrimstad. However, he had several siblings that came over, and his siblings kept the Olsen name, and some took the Sandvik name because that was the next door farm that they came from. So as you can see, this is kind of confusing to keep track of. So that's where you have to be very careful. Many of them did change their name when they came over here, and oftentimes maybe after a family farm or the area that they came from. So I always suggest to people to use the sources that are already available to you. First of all, write down what you remember. I don't have very many cousins who remember a lot about my grandparents or great-grandparents, but I have one cousin left who does. So I ask her to tell me stuff, write down stuff. I ask her a lot of questions. Ideally, you should record any older relatives using your phone, whether audio or video. Check with area church records. I checked with the Canton Church because it's Lutheran church, but there again, the records in 1902 when they came over are in Norwegian. I can't read Norwegian, but I could copy them and probably get it transcribed. So do check with the old church records because many of them have excellent records. And many of the countries over there kept records as well. So sometimes you can get a hold of those. There are some terms. Every country has its own terms that they use. And I've got a list of here how to find them. And of course, anybody can have this presentation. So in the Norway, they have the bygdelag or logs, which are these community organizations, and they have stevnas. And this is a social gathering of a particular log or logs. So there are many regional of these bygdelags or stevnas and you can join them, and they all have, practically all have a Facebook group, and they have meetings all over, especially the Midwest. And then they have the Big books, which are the Book of Family Farm Histories. UND has the largest collection of the Big books from Norway, and they're very, very helpful. You can go up to UND, you can review them. Man, they're just really fascinating. I've been up there, and it's ideally what I would do is set up an appointment ahead of time to make sure somebody's going to be there to help you go through them. And then you can get a copy of them. What I did is I took mine and I had a copy like in PDF, and then I put it into Google Translate, and it translated it all for me. And I think it does a pretty good job. Now, Family Search also has links to all these types of things, of these words that you need to know for every country. So Family Search site, their wiki is very helpful in that regards also. Here's some listing of some Danish genealogical terms. The Danish Museum has those, as well as, again, Family Search. So these are links that would be very, very valuable. The one from Danish Museum had like a huge whole list of Danish genealogical terms. And lots of times those are terms that are meant for like a grandparent or a mother or a father. And you would need to know that. So when you look at a record, you need to know what the column means. So that's why those terms are very helpful to use. Here are some Swedish genealogical terms. Again, if you notice in this Family Search sites, you just substituted Swedish for Norwegian or Danish, and it's the same link. That's what we call good web page naming when they do that. So it's easy to find. So these Family Search wikis are very helpful for all the different types of genealogy research because they have a lot of information on them. My other suggestion would be to maybe go to a Family Search Center. The one here in Sioux Falls is very helpful, and they can help you out with that as well, help you to find that information. We have in fact, we have an SVGS member who is an LDS member and can help you with all of that. Here are some Danish resources as well. I have not researched the Danish side as much, so that's one area I'm getting into now more so. And so one of my goals is to go to one of the Danish museums, and Viborg has a museum. We have one down in Elkhorn, Iowa has a museum, and so on. So some of those museums can be very helpful to give you some ideas of where to look. And so I'd suggest maybe check those out as well. The Norwegian resources there are a lot of those. Not only do the logs all have those, but obviously the Family Search Centers, Family Tree Magazine has a list of those, and then an example of some Facebook groups. So if you're on Facebook, my suggestion would be to type in the region that you're from and see if you can find one. I have found, for instance, in the Swedish sites and the Danish sites and so on, that people are very helpful and just will really, really answer questions for you. And don't forget, there's also the Ancestry message board still. It still is used today. I made my original contact in Norway many years ago from somebody on an Ancestry message board. She saw me on her tree. She asked if I was this person. I said I was. And since then, we've communicated many times, and she lives near Oslo, Norway. I also one time posted about wanting information about the family area in Denmark, and somebody in Facebook, and somebody went to that church, that parish church, and took pictures of the church, talked to somebody from that parish church, and they sent me information all about my family that used to go to that church. And what it was his family and my family disagreed over how the minister taught the Lord's Prayer, and so they left the parish. And I thought, boy, that just seems like modern day Lutheran still. So anyway, I'm just saying there are a lot of ways you can get help. My family farm in Denmark is now a toy factory. So they have a website. I've contacted them, and he has sent me many pictures of the place and has said if I ever get over there, feel free to let him know, and he'll be glad to give me a tour of the whole little area there. So see, it's just amazing how you can find that information out and not even know that maybe it exists until you do the research. Some Swedish resources as well. I haven't researched this area very much, but it's one that I have an interest in. Again, some Facebook groups. They all have some sort of a website where you can find information, many of it in their own language. So you might need to translate it. So sometimes the language barrier can really slow you down. And that's where you have to learn maybe what some of those genealogical terms are. So that can be very helpful to know those terms. So how to find the records? Well, first of all, Family Search website is very, very helpful, or Ancestry. I also have found that my Norwegian relatives, many of them use MyHeritage. And so I found a lot of information there. So I don't know why that's so popular over in Norway or in the Scandinavian countries, but it seems to be. So I also have a site there. I don't pay for it, but I have a free site, and I have found information from people. So there are just a lot of ways you can find records. Very typically, like we can here in America, they have the same types of resources over in the Scandinavian countries, and especially the churches can be very helpful over there as well. So here are some more groups about in social media and the logs. So the one in Norway I use is the Aksnes Historielag on Facebook. So look by the commune or the region that you're from in one of those countries. Many of them will have a Facebook group, and many of them will offer to help you out. People I have found very, very, very helpful. We have a person in our society who has done a lot of Norwegian research and took over our Norwegian gig after Jim Olsen passed away. And I would suggest you contact her, especially. She has been to Norway. I have not. She is very helpful and knows a great deal about how to research in Norway. She also is the head of a couple of the logs that they have for genealogy research. So she knows a great deal about the logs and the different stevnies that they have. It is amazing how many people in the Midwest here have Scandinavian roots. So there are a lot of people oftentimes who are very helpful with that information. This is what I mentioned at the beginning. So this is a picture that was someone actually posted in a Facebook group on my great-grandfather's brother. And I thought, wow, that looks really, really familiar. And the name was familiar to me. So when I looked it up, sure enough, that was the brother of my great-grandfather. And so that's what I mean by posting things in some of these groups. You just never know when somebody might post something that you might be familiar with. They had several family members perish by sea because they lived on a fjord, and they did fishing back then, of course. And so that's part of the reason why some of them came to America was in the early 1900s, late 1800s, it got pretty rough financially, I think, for a large family. And so many of them did end up coming over to America. But when they changed names, several of them did, to the different names, last names, then it gets confusing and kind of hard to keep track of. So that's been one of my problems I've had in searching people. So here are some genealogical libraries to visit. I have not been to very many of them. I've been to the Family History Library. I've been to UND's. These are all good ones for Scandinavian places. The Allen County Public Library in Fort Wayne, Indiana, I understand is very good. I have not been there. I have roots from my dad's side from Missouri, so that's one I want to go to down there in Independence, Missouri. But as you can see, there are a lot of libraries out there that have some great information. And again, I always suggest people go get some sort of an appointment with somebody ahead of time. When I went to UND in North Dakota, that's what I did. I made an appointment ahead of time to make sure somebody was there who could help me out. And I just have found so much information from places like that. So if you can get a hold of any resources from a specific area of that country, then that can be very helpful. And don't be afraid to call and ask ahead of time, see what they have. Obviously, if you have the New England roots, some of these ones out east are very, very helpful. If you have early settlers to America, that can really be helpful. This is the one I went to, the Arnie G. Brekke collection at UND, because they have the Norwegian farm books. I think it's the largest collection of them. Decorah, Iowa has some, Elkhorn, Iowa, Minneapolis does. We have a few in Sioux Falls. The Family History Centers can access even information that might be online that you can't access. So they can be really helpful there too. tied into those because they are tied into the Salt Lake City Library. Some are specific for Norwegian. I have used this a little bit, Arkvideriket. Again, when it's in another language, it can be hard to read. I understand the St. Olaf College also has some good information, as well as the Madison Library. I have been to the Madison one just very briefly, but I did not spend a lot of time there. So that'd be another one to maybe check out. We also have the Center of Western Studies here in Sioux Falls, and they have some information. So reach out to them, and they might have some information for you too. I have gone through that library and they have some information. So there are some obvious mistakes to avoid. Accepting information from other family trees as gospel, we all know, is not necessarily a good idea. Not clicking on every hint or leaf in Ancestry. You want to really use acceptable sources for documentation. Be careful of family stories. My grandma used to tell a story that we were related to John Adams and John Quincy Adams, and it's so far removed that really we're not very closely related. So you have to be careful about those ideas. I always recommend you record the older people in audio or video. My great aunts used to tell a lot of stories that I wished I would have recorded and I did not. And boy, I wish I had those stories today. And then obviously you don't want to only keep paper copies, because if you have a fire, you would lose them. Scan things, keep some digital, maybe things that are really important, obviously put in a safe. So be aware of that too. I always think about that when people have fires, like, oh my gosh, what about genealogy stuff? So that always worries me. And then there's some useful sites for reference. Cindy's list obviously has a lot. The Family Search Wikis, Find a Grave, Ellis Island. Many of us probably have used Ellis Island. I also look up Find a Grave because I find a lot of obituaries on Find a Grave, and some of those obituaries can be very helpful. I had a relative, I found out that his parents died by murder-suicide. So then you have to decide, do you include that or not? I don't know. I didn't know what to do, whether I should include that, but yet it is part of history. So you have to be aware of that. A couple more spots there of resources. This is a book that I use very religiously when I use my Scandinavian genealogy guide, and I got a lot of my ideas from. I highly recommend, if you're doing Scandinavian research, that you should get this book for about 30 bucks. That's very, very, very helpful. Good article here in the Digital Commons at Augustana, actually, out of Augustana Library. So this is a good article to use as a resource to talking about people settling here. And of course, then the Big to Book collection in this website here. Sometimes you can find some of them online, which can be very, very, very helpful. So for example, in the Big to Book, what it does is they're in Norwegian, and it's a whole history of a family farm. So what you do is we have a scanner at the library called a Seizure scanner, and you can scan it to Word or OCR scanning. And then if you upload that to Google Translate, it will give a really pretty good English version of it. So that can be really helpful. So that's something that I have done with mine, Big to Book information. I have some references and some contact info here. We do have a library there in the old courthouse museum that's open usually Tuesday to Friday afternoons. I suggest you call ahead to make sure it's going to be open. It's on the second floor there. And we meet in the second floor in the old law library the first Thursday of the month. We have several people in the society who can help you research. And so don't be afraid to turn to them whether you belong or not and ask for help with your research. We have a lot of people who have done Scandinavian research, so that can be very helpful. And we certainly can help you out. So reach out and ask us for help, because we have one person who's dedicated just for research for people. So almost all of us can help you out and get you started. What are some questions you might have for me that I could help you out with?
Feel free to unmute. We're a small enough group. See if there's anything on Facebook. We've got 5 people watching on Facebook, so if anyone has a question from there, feel free to type it in the comments there and I will get it to Wendy.
Where are you stuck at, perhaps?
Well, I guess I'll ask you a question then. So I started doing this for our family, and I think I had mentioned you get back to about right before they came to the United States.
Mhm.
I don't know I don't know where to go. Like how there's a whole bunch of leaves, like you said. But I mean, I kind of find it hard to believe we're related to any kings or queens, as my very, very past says.
Right. Well, one thing you have to remember is that the Scandinavian people moved around a lot. So, you know, you think about the Vikings who went and traveled a lot, and so they might have settled in England, or they might have settled in Ireland at one point, or wherever. So sometimes that is part of the problem because of the moving around. You have to decide for yourself, how far back do you need to go to be satisfied? Sometimes we probably all reach a dead end where we can't go back any further because we can't find any documentation. That's a fact probably for all of us. Somebody saying that they can find out that they're related to Jesus probably really can't, because there's not the documentation. I've heard people say that. So for yourself, satisfy how far back you need to go. Now, what country did they come from in Scandinavia?
Oh boy, I can't even remember. I'd have to look it up.
Okay. Because obviously, I mean, a lot of them came from farms, and a lot of them, you know, the farm books in Norway obviously are really helpful because it tells you who owned the farm for a long time. And it's just amazing that you can find all that information out about them. However, on the other hand, they give you a lot of information, and it can be kind of hard to wade through and to figure out, gosh, this seems like a lot of people and a lot of information, and how do I narrow it down to make it useful for me? Certainly reach out to our organization and ask for some help. We'll be glad to have somebody sit down with you one-on-one and help you out and figure out where you need to go. You know, what resource do you need to use? I think for all of us, the different websites like Ancestry or MyHeritage or Genie or Family Search are useful in different ways. So sometimes those can be very helpful. I try different ones to see what information that I can find. And then I have to weed through it and decide, is this good? Is this useful? Does this seem accurate, you know, for the timing and everything? So reach out to one of us in our website. Feel free to email me and I'll find someone who can help you out. Okay.
Awesome. We got a couple questions coming from Facebook. I know you kind of touched on this. What do you think is the best place for translating documents?
Well, I really like Google Translate. I think it's pretty good. There probably are others out there. I've not used others. Is it perfect? Probably not, because some words don't literally translate probably the same. You know, and the word order can make a difference in how the meaning comes across. But I think it's pretty good. And by the way, you guys, Google has digitized a lot of books that are free in the public domain. So like my dad's side of the family is from early America, and almost all those books about like Virginia and Maryland and all those places that talk about the settlements and who lived there a long time ago, are all those books are digitized and they're free on Google Books. Just go to books.google.com.
Great tip. We have another comment from Facebook. It says, I came in late, but DAR is another good information place. Maybe not so much for the Scandinavian purpose. Is that
It is.
the resolution, maybe?
It is. I could go join the DAR, and I have contacts in the DAR. We have some members that belong to DAR. It's one I highly recommend. Absolutely, especially for any early American history. That I understand they have a phenomenal library. They keep really good records. And so, yes, that might be a really good resource if you have early people in America. You bet.
Very cool. Well, if anybody has any other last minute questions, message us, and I'm happy to send this. I'm assuming I can get this PowerPoint from you, Wendy.
Absolutely, I'll share it. Anybody can have it.
If anyone wants this, just email us, ollie@edu. Wait, what is our email? I just got a blank. Ollie
at usd.edu.
I'm like, what if something's not right here? Email us and then we're happy to send this on. That way you have the links. You can just click on the links that Wendy has already done all the work here for you. So really, this is so much information. It's amazing. One more question. Are parish records in Yankton available? Do you know anything about that?
Well, almost every church keeps records. I work at a church, so I know. And many churches do keep good records, and you can often get them from a church. Yes. So definitely ask at your church that someone might have joined or belonged to. They have to keep records. All churches have to keep records. Sioux Valley Genealogical Society also has sometimes some church records, as well as the library, as well as the old courthouse museum, the research center up there on Westport. They have some. So there are a lot of places that have records like that. Yes. So reach out and ask.
Okay. I suppose they would be able to tell you if they're digital or not.
Right. And remember, a lot of records are not digital, you guys. I mean, we have a lot of resources at the our library that are not digital. And our people will let you know that. They'll tell you that.
Sure, that makes sense. All right, well, I guess we'll just finish up here, and tomorrow I just wanted to remind everyone, since we did have to do a little flip flopping, tomorrow is how not to name a baby, and we have heard it's not just babies, it's naming all kinds of different things, so it should be super interesting.
All right, good.
Right, thank you so much, Wendy. Again,
thank you.
For the presentation, and everyone else have a wonderful day.
All right, take care.
Bye.